Happy Valentine's Day, Rosebuds! I hope you had a wonderful lover's holiday. If you're here listening to this, I would venture to say you're the type who curls up on the couch for a lovely horror movie marathon. I'm right there with you. I apologize that we're posting this almost down to the wire as V-Day is nearly over, but better late than never. I was a little under the weather these past 2 weeks. If you're new here, I tell a group of creepy stories, all of them around a theme, and all the stories are allegedly true except for one. It's up to you to guess which story is the fake. I always reveal the imposter story at the end, so make sure to listen all the way through. Today, we have some stories that may or may not be demonic entities haunting our OPs. With that, sit back, snuggle down with your favorite box of chocolates, and settle in for 4 terrifying demon encounters to tell in the dark. Story number 1. Jinns are calling me. I was in my 2nd grade of high school when this event happened. I was staying in a male dormitory with a scholarship since my school was in a different city than my hometown. I was quite a successful student too. Unlike the other rooms in the dormitory, our room was divided into 2 by an aluminum door. The room had a single door. You had to pass through the part of the room we were staying to visit the other room. 3 beds and 3 closets were on one side, and 3 beds and 3 closets were on the other side. The room was for 6 people, but we were staying as 5. Vulcan, Sanir, and Kurdalis were sleeping on the window side while I and Sakuru were sleeping in the front section of the main door. As 5 roommates, we used to get along with each other very well. Thus, we used to sit together on the window side and chat here. It was Friday evening. We agreed to buy some snacks together and chat until the morning after school. We went shopping and came back to our dormitory. We met in the room by the window and started a conversation. While we were talking about things, the teacher's aide visited our room and took attendance. He also said, "Don't stay up late. Sleep." We told him, "We don't have school tomorrow. We'll sleep until noon," and then he left. We picked up our conversation from where we left off. It was late, and we kept talking about things. Then we started talking about jinns and some supernatural creatures. We were telling horror stories about them without caring whether they were true or not. Since it was late at night, we were afraid of these stories, but we also could not stop listening to them. You should know our friend Vulcan was a sleepwalker. Our room was on the 2nd floor. Sometimes we could not find Vulcan in his bed when we woke up. First we used to worry, but we got used to it soon. We were making jokes about it. We told this to our teachers and got the key to our room from Vulcan. We used to lock the room to prevent Vulcan from going out of the room. Anyway, we kept talking. It was around 4:30 to 5:30 in the morning. We said, "Let's sleep now." Since I'm afraid of such conversations, I said, "I will not go to bed. I'm afraid of the other side. Keep the lights on. You can sleep. I'm gonna text my girlfriend." My friend said, "Okay." Sakura was a bit weird. He was not interested in religion. He also said, "Screw the jinns," and cursed them. We all told him, "Don't say such things," and tried to explain the possible dangers he could experience because of these disrespectful words in line with our beliefs. As expected, he did not care about what we told him. Sakura went to the other section to sleep alone. I sat down and was texting my girlfriend. About 20 minutes passed after everyone fell asleep. However, I was still afraid due to the horror stories that I had listened to all night. Thus, I could not fall asleep yet. You should know the door of the room was broken. You could not open the door unless you put too much pressure on the knob, and sometimes you could not open the door at all. We even sometimes kicked it. Just then, I heard the door opening. I stretched my head forward to see who entered, but could not see anyone. I told myself, I think Sakura left the door open, but did not think about it any further. Later, the aluminum door that divides the room into two opened slowly. I thought the window in the hall was open since I felt a breeze too. I clearly felt the wind. The weather was slightly rainy and windy. I got up and closed both doors. I turned around and Vulcan woke up. His eyes were wide open and were looking at me. He asked, "Who's sleeping next to me?" Since I know Vulcan was a sleepwalker, I said, "Don't talk rubbish. No one is sleeping next to you. Go back to sleep." Vulcan swore that someone was sleeping next to him. His face was not visible, and he said he even had black teeth. Although I started to get scared, I was still saying things like, "Vulcan, there's no one there. Go to sleep." Vulcan later got up and said, "They are calling me." I once said, "Don't talk rubbish, bro. No one is calling you. Go to sleep." Vulcan suddenly rushed towards the door with quick steps. He was a sleepwalker, but he usually moved slowly. This time, there was something weird. While Vulcan was about to go out of the aluminum door, I caught him from his waist and shouted, "Stop!" However, Vulcan kept walking by dragging me. I started to shout to ask for help from my friends. I was shouting, "Sakura, wake up, bro! There is something wrong with Vulcan." Meanwhile, Catullus woke up and asked, "Who is that in Vulcan's bed?" He asked in fear, "Vulcan, who is in your bed?" I turned and looked at the bed while trying to hold Vulcan. There was no one in the bed. Senir also woke up to shouting, and I told him, "Go and tell the teacher, something is happening in the room." Senir jumped out of the bed and went to call the teacher. Meanwhile, Catullus was looking at Vulcan's bed and was standing still. Vulcan was trying to keep going and shouting, "Let go of me! They are calling me! I must go!" He was also trying to hit me and run away from me. I had no power to hold back Vulcan. I yelled, "Sakura!" but he didn't reply. Sakura was not in his bed. Suddenly, I heard breaking glass from outside. The teacher arrived. I'm not sure whether it was a coincidence or fate, but our teacher aide was our religion teacher on that day as well. He was more knowledgeable than regular religion teachers. He was holding an old book with a red cover. He always kept it with him. He entered the room with the book and caught Vulcan. Senir, me, and the teacher were barely able to put him in the bed. While we were joking, I could easily put Vulcan down on my own, but the three of us were barely handling him now. He was still shouting, "Leave me! I need to go! They are calling me from below!" The teacher opened the book and started to read something in Arabic. Vulcan was now calming down as he kept reading. Vulcan slept after the teacher read something for about 5 minutes. However, Vulcan's eyes were red. Suddenly, I remembered that Sakura was not in his bed. I said, "Teacher, Sakura is not in his bed, and I heard glass breaking outside." The entrance door of the dormitory was aluminum. The top part of it was glass. The glass was broken and there were blood stains. The door was locked. The teacher unlocked the door with keys and started to run. He was running while saying words in Arabic. We found Sakura lying down ahead. He had cut marks from broken glass on his arms. The teacher and I lifted Sakura. Meanwhile, a few people woke up to the sounds. They also helped us. While they were asking, "What happened?" The teacher said, "Don't talk." However, he was still repeating the Arabic words. He kept saying the same words. We laid Sakura next to Vulcan in Senir's bed. Catullus was sitting silent and fixed his eyes on something on the floor. Vulcan was still sleeping, and Senir was waiting next to him. The teacher said, "Go, bring cotton or something like that." Then he opened that old book and started to read again. Sakura was breathing, but he seemed unconscious. We were calling him, but he did not wake up. I was trembling with fear. I felt like there was a burden on me, but I felt lighter as the teacher kept reading. I don't remember it, but later, I fell asleep. We were at the hospital when I woke up. All teachers, the principal, and vice principals were gathered and waiting in the emergency room. All 4 of us, but Sanir, were lying in beds. I asked, "What happened, teacher?" He just asked, "What did you do that night?" Sanir already said, "We talked about Jinns, my teacher." He showed Sakuru's back. There was a red hand mark on Sakuru's back, which was a bit larger than a regular human hand. He said, "Jinns visited you. If I was not there, they could have killed all of you." He also said, if you had not held on to Vulcan, he would be just like Sakuru. We stayed at the hospital for 2 days under observation. Our religion teacher did not leave us alone. They let us rest for a month, and we did not visit the school. They sent us back to our hometowns. I stuttered for a year after the event, but I got better later. The hand mark on Sakuru's back remained for 2 years. Nothing happened to anyone after the event, apart from our deteriorated psychology. Then we returned to school. Once we got back to school, they placed all of us in different rooms. I couldn't stand the stress of everything and dropped out of school. I could not sleep in the dormitory. My mother took me to a hoja and ordered an amulet. I do not take it off even while taking a bath. Our religion teacher still calls us and asks whether anything else happened. Sometimes things I remember in one place get lost in another. When I talked about it, my teacher told me, "Jinns are playing games with you. They haunt you, and that is why you have stayed like this until now." Story number 2, Girl in the Window. For context, I'm a 19-year-old female. I was recently hanging out with some friends around the fire in the backyard. I have 4 friends, but there's only one who knows about the strange things I've experienced since I was about 10 years old. I don't talk about it because people would think I was mental. Then this happened. It was the first time it's ever happened, and I have mixed feelings. I was sitting next to my friend, I'll call Dave. With our backs to the theater room window, I felt the urge to look behind me. I got that feeling again, as if something or someone was watching me. I get this feeling, and then I see her. I should mention that I think this is related to the house and not my mental health. I never had this issue until we moved into the house. I don't see or hear things unless I'm at home, and only in certain parts of the house. I looked back and I could see the girl I always see. Her hands were flat against the glass, her hair black, slicked back, her face very pale white. Her eyes are like black orbs. I whispered to my friend Anna that I saw something in the glass. She looked but didn't see anything. Anna is the only friend I've confided in that I've been seeing this girl for some time. Maybe 15 minutes later, I noticed Dave had gone quiet after looking at the window. I asked him what was wrong. I was wondering if he had seen the same thing I did, but he simply shrugged and just went back to the group chat. Dave was a guy that I was interested in. We had been doing the awkward thing where clearly both of us wanted to date, but neither of us would make a move. Looking back, I can see that more clearly now. Anyway, Anna was staying the night as she lived on the other side of town now, but happened to work on my side of town. She was working the next day for the opening shift and decided to call it early. After some time, the others went home, except for Dave. We were sitting on the couch talking. This would have been on the couch in the theater room. We were in the middle of a nice conversation. He'd been looking down at his lap, then looked up at me, and his eyes flitted to the window over my shoulder, the same window I'd seen the girl in earlier. His eyes momentarily went wide, and then he tried to recover quickly. I'd already seen the shift and asked him, "What's wrong? Did you see her?" I blurted this out before I realized the weight of what I'd just asked. Dave was quiet as he just stared dumbfounded at me for a moment. Then he said, "I thought I saw something, like a girl, but not a girl." He stopped and rubbed at his head. "You aren't crazy," I said emphatically. "I've seen her too." His eyes went wide again and he said, "She looks like a demon or something. Her eyes are almost all black." I could see how distressed he was. I said, "I've thought for years I was maybe crazy. She looks all wet and her face is pale, right?" He replied, "Yeah, what the fuck, man? You've seen her for years? What is she?" "I don't know," I answered. "My parents knew fully well that a girl died in the pool before they bought this place. The realtor had to disclose that for legal reasons. They weren't sure if it was murder or accidental. The older brother was investigated, but they weren't ever able to charge him. It was officially put down as accidental drowning, but lots of neighbors around here disagreed." Dave just shook his head and said, "Whoa, that's pretty heavy." His eyes flitted up again to the window to check and see if she was still there, but I could tell by his audible sigh that she was gone now. I told him she was about 10, same age as me when we moved in. I was pretty shocked that he could see her. I showed him the book I started to keep, a journal of all the occurrences. Anna, in her brilliance, had suggested it when I was about 12. This was when she met me and we became friends. She was the only friend who knew about it, not even my parents. I'd been recording every single time I saw her, the research I'd done at the library. She'd never done anything to harm me, but her presence always felt ominous and cold. She always gave me a vibe like she was angry and wanted vengeance for what had been done to her. Dave in turn shared with me that he thought he was what some might call spirit sensitive. For a long time, I thought the girl, whose name was Betty, was a demon spirit due to the energy she put off in her blacked out eyes. Dave said he thought she might be angry and vengeful for sure, but not a demon. Demons were a whole other thing, and he said I would know for sure if she was a demon. Anyway, it's a strange way to connect with your current boyfriend, but Dave and I are dating now. I still get creeped out when I see Betty, but I don't have any other options. In the fall, I'm moving out and going to college. Let's just hope Betty doesn't tag along. We now interrupt this broadcast for a brief Black Rose PSA. Are you aware of the mystery smell curse? It's terrible. No matter how often you clean your fridge or take out the trash, there's always this odd and terrible mystery smell you can never find. All you have to do to avoid it is hit the like button and share this episode with a friend. All right, back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. Story number 3. Something in the brush. I underwent a significant life transformation when I was about 30 years old. I finally decided to leave the lifelong religion that I was raised in, which was very strict and rigid. I felt more like a teenager when I was 30 than when I was 13, meaning I felt such freedom and liberation from this religious cult, basically, that it created an attitude of fearlessness in me that I'd never experienced before. It was an exciting time in my life. However, my older self now looks back and wonders how I didn't get into more trouble. When I consider how dangerous some of the activities were, I'm amazed I didn't get injured or die. I had just moved to Sedona, Arizona from a small, isolated town called Winslow, Arizona. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to see or do in Winslow, including hiking. And hiking was a passion of mine. Sedona had no shortage of trails. At this time, Feeling a little spiritually disoriented, I naturally gravitated towards the large metaphysical community in Sedona. It was not unusual for people to hike up to a vista outlook, roll out a mat, and meditate. One evening, there was a beautiful and bright full moon. I spontaneously decided that I was going to hike up to this vista and enjoy a meditation session under the full moon. I had hiked this trail more than a dozen times during daylight hours. I had become extremely comfortable and familiar with the route and the general area. My first night trying this, it was absolutely perfect. There was an area where you had to go through a thick grove of juniper trees, and that portion was a little unnerving. With the shadows made by the moonlight, every light breeze made the trees sway a little, and the shadows would dance in eerie patterns on the ground. This was the first quarter mile of the trail. Past that, it began to ascend up to the outlook, and it was a narrow, rocky path with a slightly higher ascent before you reached the plateau. It was a well-known area among the locals, known as a vortex location. A vortex is a nexus of ley line energy. It would attract many tourists during the day, but there wasn't a soul in sight that night or any night after. The experience was so incredible that I returned often. I went by myself many more times, except for once. I took my husband to this spot, and in a moment of complete spontaneity, we actually ended up having some pretty awesome intimacy, if you catch my drift. These night hikes up to the plateau were becoming something of a habit for me. Another full moon rolled around, and I drove out there and parked in the small, secluded parking lot. I was getting ready to get out of my car when this foreboding, heavy feeling suddenly flooded me. I heard a disembodied voice say, "You need to leave right now." I was so startled by this sudden shift in my emotions and this spirit voice screaming at me, I didn't hesitate to start the car, back out of the parking space, and leave immediately. I just happened to look in the mirror as I was leaving, and I saw a glint of something red. There were no other people or cars in the parking lot. As I mentioned, it was small and very secluded. Like so far off the beaten path that you can't get a cell phone signal out there. But in my mirror were two red dots, as if I was looking at another car's tail lights. For half a second, my rational brain interpreted it as car lights. But as I processed this, I realized this wasn't possible. For one, there was a thick wooded fence around the parking lot, and two, the area where I saw these two red dots was very thickly forested with juniper trees and other desert brush. In other words, there was no way possible anyone could have parked a car in that area. It just wasn't possible. It suddenly occurred to me that it looked like two red glowing eyes of some creature. And this was not some small animal like the javelinas that inhabit this region. The creature would have easily towered over my car. However, I never saw its form, just those menacing eyes burning in the shadows. My confusion and fear quickly moved into panic, and I pressed the accelerator and sped away. Here's an interesting detail to this story. When you set out to the vista, another trail branches off about a third of the way in. The vista trail veers off to the left, while the path to the right is called Dead Man's Pass. But I was so spooked by this incident that I tried to research why this particular area was called Dead Man's Pass. I became interested because this would have been about where I saw the glowing red eyes, or whatever those two red dots were. You're probably expecting to hear some gruesome detail that occurred there, given such an ominous name. However, my research yielded no results. Given my terrifying experience with whatever was hiding in the brush that night, it does give me pause to wonder why it was given such a name. Needless to say, that experience scared me enough that I decided I'd had enough night hiking to last me a lifetime. So from then on out, I stuck to daytime hiking instead. Story number 4. Is the house haunted or me? This happened back in 2017. I was 17 years old, turning 18, and like some do when they are a teen, you do silly or even stupid things such as visiting an abandoned haunted place with friends. Being young, we thought it was a good idea to go to a church that was known for being haunted and a place where satanic rituals were held. As we were walking around, the air became heavy, and it felt like we were being watched. A few days later, thinking nothing of it, I'm going about my normal day. I was at my then partner's house, looking after the dog while he was at work. It's a normal day as I sat watching TV with the dog lying next to me. This dog was always just so quiet and happy to have someone sit with her. She wasn't a fuss. At about 2 p.m., my ears perk up because I can hear walking upstairs. Remember, it's just me and the dog in the house. This house is a detached house on a quiet piece of land. Suddenly, I hear loud, heavy footsteps starting from the bedroom all the way to the top of the stairs. The dog began to whimper and looked frightened. I hear the footsteps coming down the stairs, and at this point, she is full-on snarling at nothing. I stood behind her panicking, having no idea what to do about this intruder. The footsteps get to the bottom step, and it stops. The dog still looks petrified, runs back to me checking if I'm okay. After I caught my breath, I went and looked around the house. No one was there, and all the doors and windows were locked. I have a theory that maybe we brought something like a dark entity or demon back with us when we visited that abandoned haunted house. The reason I think this is because nothing like this has ever happened to me or my partner at his house. I'm unsure what to do. Well, Rosebuds, what did you think of those possible demon encounters? Before I do the reveal for the imposter story, take a moment to leave us a comment down below and tell us what you think is the difference between a demon and a dark spirit. Is there a difference in your opinion? On a personal note, story number 3 was my own personal encounter. I did experience that one firsthand. I still can't reconcile what that whole experience was about, and I suppose I never will. So obviously, that was not the fictional story. I wanted to add one more thing before doing the fictional story reveal. I love finding stories that share details of other cultures and beliefs regarding the supernatural, hence why I read the story about the Jinn. However, I do apologize that I probably mispronounced the names terribly, but I'd rather mispronounce words than letting it stop me from sharing stories from around the globe. I feel that the only way we can ever become more inclusive on our planet is through sharing stories and understanding each other's beliefs and cultures. So, if I can contribute in my own little way on my channel, then I will. Alright, let's do our reveal. Today's fictional story was story number 2, about the young adult who was being haunted by the demonic ghost of a drowned little girl. This time, no inspiration from real life, just a totally creative fiction story that I hope you enjoyed all the same. Anyways, that's a wrap, Rosebuds. Thanks for listening. Until next time, take care and stay creepy.